and welcome to another episode of the CSA's podcast, Vital Times. Today, we're revisiting the importance of mentorship in anesthesiology, and in particular, academic anesthesiology, although my hope is that everyone can take a little something away from this. I am really delighted to be joined by two wonderful guests today. The first guest is Dr. Titi Aina-Jones. She is an associate professor of anesthesiology at Texas Children's. She did her training at Boston Children's, University of Florida, and is currently the University of Florida, and is currently enrolled in a Master's of Medical Education at the University of Pennsylvania. Joining her is someone that you've heard before on this podcast, Dr. Iona Pasca, who's making a return visit. She is the Associate Program Director and Director of Research at the Loma Linda University at Riverside University Health Systems. So welcome to you both. And I'd like to start out the podcast by first of all asking you both what brought your interest in this topic? How did you get involved, and why did you decide to do a master's? I'll start with Dr. Pasca.
Rita, thank you so much for having us. Really, this was spearheaded by Titi. I can't take credit for any of this. She was really excited to talk about career development and said, we don't have enough about career development in anesthesiology. This is really where I would like to focus more work as we're completing this master's. So we'd been brainstorming for a while, trying to understand how to better address the community because we both started out kind of feeling around in the dark, figuring out who are going to be our mentors, who are going to be our sponsors, honestly, not really even knowing what that meant when we first came out of residency and fellowship. So I think this really came out of those conversations at the University of Pennsylvania, where we were able to meet really incredible, energetic anesthesiologists who are interested in medical education from across the country. And it's been a really incredible journey.
Thank you so much, Iona. I completely agree that this was born out of a desire to have had something similar when we were coming up. Because I remember early in my career, really just getting very fortunate with individuals who came up to me and offered me a helping hand and helped me understand how to build a career in academic anesthesiology. Because once we're done with training, we feel competent in providing the clinical anesthesia care, but oftentimes we don't really know what it means to become an academic anesthesiologist for those of us who are in academic medical centers. And the guidance that's provided from more seasoned colleagues helps you navigate this path, helps you understand what it means to have a mentor, what it means to have a sponsor, because a lot of these are foreign concepts to us when we're just trying to learn the details of clinical anesthesia.
Iona, what about you? Was your transition from residency and fellowship, because I know you've both done fellowships, as smooth as Dr. Aina-Jones's?
So that's really interesting. I think I was really fortunate to get into critical care anesthesiology. It was just a sort of sequence of events that were a little bit outside of my control. When I first started, there weren't these shortages in the workforce, and it was actually a little bit difficult to find work. And I was interviewing for different job positions, and then ended up interviewing for a few different fellowships, trying again to understand what the future looks like. What is that road ahead of us supposed to look like? And what does a career and work-life balance, and what is all of that supposed to mean for me? So I was fortunate to get a fellowship in critical care. It has been a huge blessing to me. And then after a year of that, I started in the academic medical center, where we had many different contracts with private practice hospitals, outpatient surgery centers. And that has also been a huge blessing to me as I reflect on all the different kinds of cases I did. Honestly, I didn't feel prepared when I walked into the ASC. I didn't feel prepared for the rapid pace of cases, extubating deep and rushing patients over to PACU to pick up your other patient and trusting the PACU nurses to finish waking your patients up and, still being with your new patient as you are still managing the old patient that was just a couple feet away from you. And really understanding how to do that very quickly. I didn't feel that prepared for that. After about a year and a half of that, I actually was transitioned into a private practice intensive care position, which was also really difficult. About an hour and a half away from home, there was an apartment there for us, but I also found that extremely difficult being away from the family for long periods of time, for weeks on end, having to stay in an apartment far away, not having any nurse practitioner or a resident to cover at night. You had to be very close by, and you were constantly on call, being called all night long with very, very long shifts. Patients were essentially yours. So I transitioned from that. I did about a year or two of that, and then I transitioned to the community hospital through Loma Linda, where I'm currently at. When I came over here, again, it was a at-need place. Basically, you just keep saying yes and yes and yes, and you kind of build this trajectory of career path, I feel like. But I came over here and was fortunate to be offered the associate program director position. And through this, I have been able to really experience many different mentors and opportunities, and being able to open the doors to things like research and society involvement, and now transitioning into committee chairs and being able to run state meetings. It's been really an incredible journey, but through that, I think I met so many sponsors that gave me these opportunities, and without them, I really wouldn't have been able to do any of this. And I also really just said yes a lot. And then someone said something that I was self-sponsoring myself, which I felt like was a very wicked term. Like I was, trying to self-promote myself. Like, who am I? Like, why am I doing such a thing? But it's not a bad thing to say, hey, I would like this opportunity if you can give it to me. So most recently, I reached out to a book editor and I said, hey, I would really like to edit a book on this. Would you have any interest? Going back and forth and really opening yet another door for creating future collaboration. So at some point, you do become sort of a self-promoter. I still don't have a cool Instagram like you, Rita, and you'll have to tell us about your Instagram and how you're doing all this, influencer kind of things, because that seems really outside my scope and very intimidating to me personally.
So, just to sort of summarize, it sounds like, Iona, that you kind of stumbled into it a little bit more, in that you did a little of this, did a little of that, and then finally found a place where you found the kinds of support that you needed. And maybe you did or did not have a great mentor, but you found people who were at least willing to support what you wanted to do and put your name forward. And Titi, it sounds like, um, on the other hand, you had a more, and I don't know if it was formal, and I would love for you to expand more on that, if it was a formal mentoring system, or if it was really just senior faculty coming up to you and saying, hey, we're open to helping you do whatever you want to do. So I'll go back. I'll go to Titi first, if you don't mind, and have you describe a little bit more what you found particularly helpful, and if it was a formal program or if it was more of an informal program.
Thank you so much for your question, Rita. So this was more of an informal program. I remember distinctly asking when I became faculty if there was a formal mentorship program, and the response I got at that time was, well, if you don't do well, we will pair you with someone to guide you, but otherwise, no, we don't have a formal
Punitive.
mentorship. Exactly. Exactly. So there was not a directed path for individuals who wanted mentorship, but I was fortunate that one of my senior colleagues, actually, the way I remember it, and it may just be a false memory, but what I remember was we just both happened to be in the locker room at the same time. And she looked at me and said, you should set up some time for us to sit and talk about what you want to see in your career, where you would like to go in your career. And that was really where it blossomed from. because I came into academic medicine knowing that I was enthusiastic about teaching, but I didn't really know the nitty gritty of what it meant, how to become involved in SPA, and how to become involved on the local level. And that was where that guidance was truly helpful. I was able to navigate courses on the local level through our medical school. Baylor College of Medicine offered a lot of faculty development sessions, programs such as peer coaching, which was very helpful for junior faculty trying to teach for the first time. Having somebody tell you, okay, this work is how you can better engage the audience, or do this instead. And then going more towards the national level, getting involved with AAMC. And it was really through the guidance of senior faculty who had done it already, who were able to provide suggestions of paths that I could consider, and really were helping to fan that flame within and help direct it in a more meaningful path.
And so can I just ask, sorry, and I know I do want to get back to Iona as well, but this brings up another question for me, and that is, um, do you think this is was this faculty person and the importance of the locker room? Sorry, I have to go there because I mean this is I think what so many, particularly women, have come up against for so many years, this sort of what we call the good old boys club, but it's really probably as simple as I'm in the locker room getting changed or doing whatever, and someone says, "Hey, have you heard of?" or "Hey, do you wanna?" or "Hey, there's this great opportunity you should try." And it's just proximity, right? And
Very
it's
true.
really that it's an intentional good old boys or a good old girls club. It's really just that this is who we're near. But do you know, was this person who reached out to you someone who reached out to a lot of junior faculty, or do you think that it was she could tell that you were particularly enthusiastic and really wanted to to develop and to be successful? And what do you think made her reach out to you in that way?
I would say it is an individual who reaches out to a lot of junior faculty and also has a plate full of mentees. But with any successful mentor mentee relationship, it is all about what each individual is going to bring to the table and having that mutual commitment to the relationship that helps it grow.
Great. And so, Ayana, I wanted to go back to you. It was my summary of your experience kind of on the right track or not? Not so much.
Yeah, there was a lot of stumbling, Rita.
That's
Um,
okay. Many of us stumble.
so, but looking back, I mean, I can specifically point to people that were there and that had guided me. It's really been incredible because even two of my letter writers for entering into residency, one of them ended up being the president of SAPM for 2 years, and another one ended up being a program director that I've been working closely with in the critical care community. And so you have these like sort of pointing stars that are kind of there all along that lead you on these roads. And when I meet now with mentees, my husband says I'm always trying to mentor everyone. And I think it's because of this like lack of understanding early on of what that even meant. And so I tell them that every single thing that you've done in your trajectory actually impacts that trajectory in significant ways. So if they come in with an IT background, or if they come in with like a public health, or even, a music background,
Mhm.
that tends to impact the road that people take when they're developing their careers.
And then what do the two of you hope, especially through and I assume partly through this master's program, but through your own ambitions and desires, what would you hope to be able to create for, future colleagues and future new faculty as they transition from either residency or fellowship into early practice situations? We'll start with Iona this time.
So there is this huge gap, I feel, between transitioning from, and especially I think in private practice where you don't have these safety nets. I think in academic, we have a lot of support within the system. But I think even in private practice, it's more so where you might be the only one in the surgery center. You are in these conditions that really are outside of your control. You have to figure out how to bill, how to be efficient, how to navigate computers and families and nurses and conflict resolution pretty much on your own. And especially walking straight out of a residency, it can be really intimidating. And then everyone talks to you about contract negotiation, like don't take that initial contract. At least in academics, most of the time, your contract is what it is. And
Right.
everybody has the same contract. And so you have this sort of guilt like, oh, well, I mean, I didn't get anything done with the contract. I haven't, I didn't navigate any sort of title for myself. And, people kind of make you feel guilty. And then, God forbid, you not take enough time or you're perceived as one of these people who hasn't done anything for herself lately. And then you get asked, well, what have you done for yourself lately? As if, like it's not enough that we're doing all this stuff for everybody, including our families and our workplaces and our students and our mentees. But now we're supposed to feel guilty for also not having had a massage yesterday or something.
I haven't had a massage in many, many years. I used to do it all the time, but I don't anymore. I don't know. Titi, how about you? What do you think, or what would you hope to be able to create for future colleagues, future? It's nice to say future generations, but that may be too broad because medicine changes so fast. Who knows what the workplace will look like in even 10 years from now?
Thank you for that question. And you were so right. We don't know what this new era of generative AI may bring to our academic and private practice anesthesiology worlds. But one thing that has been on my mind lately to bring and to leave for future colleagues is a framework of how to better navigate your career as you begin that journey. My hope is for individuals to come in having completed fellowship with almost a roadmap that this is what you need to do if you're interested in path A, path B, path C. Because as we know in academic medicine, for example, you can be a clinician scientist, a clinician educator, or you could be a pure clinician. There are so many paths to take, but once you've decided on what best suits you, it would be helpful to know that in your early career, this is what you should consider. And then as you progress, then consider this. So there was an article recently that I was looking at that's called Navigating the Stages of an Academic Career for Pediatricians by Daneman and Kellner. It focuses on pediatricians, but the message is very similar to what would apply to us and to any other medical subspecialty. They talk about 4 stages of your career, where you start as the nervous novice, and then after about 2-3 years in this phase, you begin to get your footing, and then you become in stage 2, you're in that yes stage or a gung ho stage, where you're taking all the opportunities as they come, and you're trying to find your niche in your career, what you like doing. And then you move on to a more mature stage in stage 3, which they called a self-respect phase, which is also when you're able to help individuals pull them forward in their career as a mentor to them. And then you become, in the final stage, potentially a reluctant retiree because you may not be ready to leave
Oh, that's 100% me right now.
that career
I hadn't heard that
in
phrase.
medicine. But it's just helpful for people to know that you will go through stages and phases in this career. And it's natural, it's normal, and not just to know what to expect is what I would like to leave with the future generations.
And this is really interesting, and I'm just going to take a second to digress because it's actually a conversation that I'm having with several of my colleagues at Stanford. We have a clinician educator tract here, and one of the things is, what does that mean? And the issue is that that can mean so much to so many different people. I was sharing with others that we have people who come in who really are almost purely clinicians, and how do they then go to prove, because within our promotion systems, and it does vary a little bit depending on what institution you're at, what they're looking for in order to
Mhm.
promote you, but within our promotion systems, to go from assistant to associate professor, you have to establish a regional reputation. To go from associate to full professor, you have to have a national reputation. And how do you do that if you're only, if no, I shouldn't say, I don't mean it as a as meaning you're only a clinician, because you're a phenomenal clinician, but you may have less ways of proving to others outside of your department, your division, your group, that you have this reputation. And so, and then you have others who are really just on the education side of things and do very little clinical work,
Mhm.
because of that, that's their role within their department. And so in some ways, I love your idea of having a framework of what are some of the things, and recognizing that it can be awfully broad. One of the
Correct.
biggest things, at least in my department, or in my institution at Stanford, is that we get told over and over and over again, you actually do not have to have any peer-reviewed journal publications in order to get promoted. And yet, that still often becomes the sort of gold standard that everybody holds you up to. It's like, well, they only have X number of peer review publications, or they have X number of publications, but they're in these lesser journals. And it's like, how do we actually reconcile all of those different aspects? And I'm really curious as to what you both think on that. Iona, do you want to go?
So, sure. So, when we first started on this journey, I really didn't understand what that career advancement would look like, or that I even wanted necessarily that career advancement. So, going from instructor to assistant professor to associate to full professor, and what the different rankings meant, was really sort of a black box for me. So I've really been exploring it. And again, as I've been exploring it, I've been trying to pull as many people with me as possible, trying to help everybody else get promoted. It's like, oh, well, you can get promoted. Here's what you need to do. Here's what. And what's really interesting is that I have a lot of people who say, no, I simply don't want that. Um, they don't necessarily want to get promoted. But yes, getting promoted to full professor is huge and daunting. And for women, there's actually very few anesthesiology professors compared to men. I think it's somewhere around 25 to 30% of full professors are women. And they talk about this big gap because here we are trying to juggle all of our different titles and sort of our different research papers and the journals and the comments from the editors. And then we've got our kids and our family and cooking and dinner and, the expectations from society that we're also having to meet. So it becomes quite difficult. And Rita, you've talked before about putting everything on pause for a little bit while you raise the kids, but also that is a very difficult path to navigate. Just in 2025 in Anesthesia and Analgesia, there was a paper about chairs in anesthesiology, and they actually showed that there was just as many peer-reviewed publications in women compared to men who are chairs. But they had an average of somewhere around 50 publications for people who were chairs. In the investigator tract, there was an average of 87 papers that chairs had published. So, I mean, do I really want to be a chair one day? I don't really think so. I think my family would probably be up in arms if I suggested that this is the track I want to take. But yeah, it is difficult to navigate and to juggle all parts of our lives as women.
And I just want to quickly answer that before I let Titi talk some more on this, because I think this is such a fascinating and important topic. I I'm a believer. Well, you have to do what's right for yourself and your family, right? You can't, one size doesn't fit all by any means, and particularly for I mean, it's true for everyone. It's not just women and it's not just men, but I think more for women, and maybe this is from my point of view as a woman, that it is more, there's study after study that shows that we carry a much greater mental load when we do have children and families, and that even if we're working twice as hard in the office or the operating room or wherever we are, we're still often carrying a greater percentage of that mental load. For me, I was lucky in that I was able to pause because my husband was making enough money, and we decided, we would try to lower our costs elsewhere, that I was able to go 50% for a period of time. And it was huge. I don't know what I would be doing or where I would be now if I hadn't been able to do that. I know that that's not possible for everyone. But I also think it's probably more possible for a lot of people, and not just women. It may make more sense for the male part of that, of that couple, to go part-time or to cut back on their work schedule, or for both partners to take a cut back, so that during the time that the children are young and they're growing, that everyone is sort of adjusting a little bit. But that's kind of off topic. Titi, I'm really curious what your opinions are, and particularly on this topic of how to build a professional network. How do you go about doing that within, an institution? Because I know I hear so much from people saying, well, I don't have any mentors where I am. I don't have anyone who's either someone who's achieved things that I would like to emulate, or who's not so focused on their own thing, or
Mhm.
who's not going to stab me in the back the moment, we get something done or a project put together. So I'd really love to hear your insights on this.
Thank you. So this is probably easier for us in the post-COVID era than it's ever been because of how well we're able to connect virtually through Zoom and
Mm,
all these other platforms. So while you may not be able to meet with a mentor in person at your institution, having that opportunity to still see them on video allows there to be a personal connection, which would not have been the same if you had to only do it via phone calls. So I really do think technology has made it slightly better for us. And I think one thing we forget also is to look beyond our departments. When I began doing some work in education research early on, before I began my master's and just was really dabbling, I looked at the Department of Pediatrics because they had a robust program in medical education. And they even had a whole research day dedicated to education. And it was through them that I was able to get mentors on how to build my first project, looking at the classrooms for our academic or for our anesthesia residency program. So looking beyond the department is helpful, looking also at other institutions in the local area, and also potentially for getting that network and that regional presence, speaking at meetings that are not MD focused all the time. I was one of my first presentations was for our PACU nurses at their conference. They invited me to come and talk about my work in global anesthesia at the time. So those are some suggestions that I would put on the table.
Iona, what do you think? How do you, if you're at an institution where you really don't have the kind of support that you would like, or the kind of support that you're looking for, how do you reach out and find other people? And I think Titi's points are really well taken, that looking outside of just physicians, looking outside of your own department sometimes. I remember early on getting asked to give sedation lectures for the ENT. For some reason, ENT, ortho, I used to do their pain lecture on a regular basis, emergency room medicine. But it's not always easy to reach out across boards. Do you have any thoughts or advice on how to do that for others?
Yes. So, what I didn't realize when I started giving lectures to the one family medicine resident who would come through my little ICU where I first started is that I actually made a name for myself by just giving a lecture to that one student, right? So, they sort of nominated me to be their clerkship director, and started sending me onto committees within family medicine, within QI, within the hospital.
Oh, wow.
And then I ended up um, ended up getting this associate program director position through which I got involved in the educational program divisions in the CSA. And that's really where everything sort of opened up. That's where I developed so many mentors, met a lot of women on the women anesthesiologists for CSA, as well as getting involved in the meetings. And then you just, once you are on these meetings and on, you really just want to have an opinion and want to be able to produce and want to be able to support and want to have good ideas that you can carry forward. And people pick up on your energy pretty quickly. But whatever you do, just do it well and diligently.
I love that. I love that story because that just shows how, oh my gosh, that's just wonderful because that just shows how important, doing a good job for just one person really is. That you just started off by giving one lecture and you must have done it well. I'm assuming you did it well. To one resident who was rotating and how that really led to something. And I think that's such a great tip because I think people sometimes look around a room and there's only, a handful of people in the room and feel like, oh, this is a waste of my time. But yet you have no idea what that ripple effect or the butterfly effect is going to be of those people, especially if you do a good job with that. Um, what are some, and I know, Iona, you're critical care and Titi is pediatrics. We don't have any regional or cardiac anesthesiologists, but do either of you have specific insights that you would like to share with young faculty starting out in either of those fields or both of those fields? I'll have each of you go. So maybe Iona, if you want to start first, what advice would you give to a new critical care trained faculty member who's just starting out in terms of how to build a career, how to be successful by whatever metrics they define their success by?
So Rita, I try really hard to encourage people to get involved in their state and national societies, as well as to start research projects with the medical students. The medical students are hungry to do research projects. So if you know anybody in undergrad wanting to go into medical school or a medical school student who wants to go into residency, they're all really looking for the ability to create research. The average anesthesia medical student who is looking to go into residency starts residency with about 12 research experiences.
Wow.
So they're really looking to expand their research portfolio and their CV. And that's a great way for you to start getting involved, presenting the posters with your medical student, then judging, just email ahead of time and say, hey, I'd love to judge at this meeting. People are always looking for judges for their meetings. And so then eventually you begin judging at bigger meetings and you begin to understand research methodology, creating networks, getting involved in the big national meetings. And then from there, you get other opportunities, make other friendships, always carry around your iPhone and sort of tap everybody's phones and get everybody's contact information because, next week you might have a student who is interested in Texas Children's. And so I might just call up TT and say, hey, can you connect with this person who, it may even be pediatrics, it may not even be anesthesiology, but that creates this extensive network. And then that creates these opportunities for research and opportunities for your own growth as well.
Titi, how about you? Any advice?
The advice will also tie in a little bit to the question you asked before about building your professional network. Because as you were starting out as a junior faculty member, you want to establish your network locally as well as nationally. And one of sometimes the most intimidating experiences at a national meeting is that mentoring reception, or that networking reception they have on the first night of the meeting. But it is so vital that you attend and that you at least try to meet one or two new people and not just the people that you came into that reception with, so that you can begin to broaden your connections, because those relationships that are formed at those national meetings can develop into projects. They can develop into shared experiences, support, peer coaching. You never know what could come out of those experiences. So I would recommend, as Iona said, being involved in your societies. The Society for Educational Anesthesia is one that I always like to plug. It's a smaller, intimate meeting that's easy to navigate. The American Society of Anesthesiologists meeting is vital, as well as for those of us in pediatrics, the Society for Pediatric Anesthesia meeting. So being involved in those meetings is helpful, going to see what individuals and topics are being covered at those meetings helps you as you start to grow your career. And actually, the Journal of Pediatric Anesthesia also shares a lot of insightful topics that will help a junior faculty member as they're growing. And one article that came out back in 2020, which we'll also share with the audience, is one that was titled Pediatric Anesthesia Training to Early Stage Opportunities for a Firm Foundation. And the authors in that were really trying to express what they felt was vital for faculty as they went from residency to fellowship to early career and then eventually mid-career. How do you establish yourself in a career in pediatric anesthesia? And no surprise at all, it was really focused in on mentorship.
That's great. That's great. And I wanted to circle back to something you had said, Titi, early on about how a lot of your early sort of more educational experiences, more formal educational kind of faculty development experiences came from the Department of Pediatrics and not so much the Department of Anesthesiology. And I think that's really amazing. I mean, both of you have shown such a flexibility and adaptability to look outside of just what's being offered by your specific department and to look elsewhere. And I suspect that's part of what's made you both so successful. And I think that's something that listeners can really take away from this is, that if you are not finding what you need where you are, look outside of where you are, maybe immediately outside to another department, another division, in Iona's case, the family practice group, and Titi's case, pediatrics. In cardiac anesthesia, they may look for, there's a lot of cardiac people out there, so it could be within cardiology or within even cardiac surgery or someone else. And then look to your meetings. You've both really mentioned and emphasized the importance that going to and networking at meetings has. And I love that idea of, especially for the introverts in the room, which I'm clearly not, but I know that there are introverts in the room, where if you just set your goal as meeting one or two new people, that's not hard. If you go into it and it's like, oh my God, there's all these new people and I don't know any of them and they all know each other and I'm, this little wallflower in the corner. But if the idea is I'm going to go and say hello to one person I don't know or two people I don't know, I mean, that's a huge win right there. I wanted to end really quickly because time is always of an essence, and that leads very nicely into kind of the work-life integration. Do you think there's a role for good mentorship in helping you achieve that work-life integration? Or again, is that something you have to sort of figure out for yourselves? And I'll start with Titi on this one.
That is an amazing question, and sometimes seems like this goal that we try to reach that we cannot always get to. Work-life integration can be reached through good mentorship, because your mentor often is someone you look to as a role model, and they can share with you advice on what has worked well for them and things that you may want to consider. And as alluded to earlier in this podcast is, and there might be times in your life, in your family's life, that you may need to pull back on how much you're doing professionally to focus in on the family. So while we talk about this work-life integration, it doesn't always have to be a 50-50 split. There will be times when one is pulling more than the other, and knowing how to prioritize what is most important in that moment is vital, and mentors can help you make those difficult decisions.
Iona, what do you think?
I can't say that I have any of it figured out. I try really hard to bring my kids to as many of the work functions as I can, including like workshops that I create. If I go to society meetings, I try to bring them. I try to involve them so that they don't feel like this is separate from them, but that it really is part of our identity as a family, that, my career is not taking away from their experiences, but it's actually enhancing their experiences. And I want to make sure that they acknowledge that, to the point that I even want my daughter to come and do research with me this summer. She's an incredible therapist. So,
Oh,
I'm trying really, really hard to be a good mom here. But something that Titi actually taught me just very recently was actually that I should get a coach. And so at this point in my life, I actually have gotten a coach who also is a mother and who's also been a very successful anesthesiologist, and who has been really helpful in helping me, navigate the way forward, trying to support, the weight of the world on my shoulders, as I often do, and trying to figure out exactly what do I still say yes to and what am I allowed to say no to these days.
since you brought up a coach, would you mind defining what the difference is between what's the difference between a coach and a mentor? Isn't that can't a mentor also be a coach? Can a coach also be a mentor? Or are they two pretty separate things?
I'm still really early on in this whole experience, but I just have to tell you that I cry regularly with my coach, and with my mentors, I try not to cry.
Oh,
So I will
really interesting.
I will say that mentors are often everything to you. They are your coach, your sponsor, your advisor, and they are with you for this long-term journey in your personal and
If
professional
you're
life,
lucky.
if
That
you're
that
lucky.
sounds really lucky to have that
And
kind of relationship.
your coach is really there to help you find your voice. I see it as that in some ways, because they're not giving you advice. They're helping you get to the answer that's within. So that's the true difference is they give you the support, the encouragement, and they ask you those critical questions that make you think about the next steps.
Well, I love this whole discussion, and I feel like we could keep talking for it's so, for hours on this. And I am the reluctant retiree for sure. I'm now in my latter, latter part of my career. And as I look at it and I start getting all the emails that says, come to this workshop on whatever retirement. And I'm like, no, I'm not ready. I really literally went from like 2 years ago, going like, why am I getting these? I don't understand, to now like, oh, I guess I am at that age where I should be thinking about retiring. And I definitely don't feel ready to retire anytime soon. And I hope to continue in the roles that I've been doing it. But I would love to know from the two of you. You're both kind of associate professor level, so mid level careers. What are some last either advice or points or some last things that you would like to leave the audience with before we sign off? I'll start with I can't remember who I started with last. So I think TT. Did I start with Iona last? I don't remember, but we'll start with TT this time.
I would say what I want to leave with the audience is to always follow your passion. You asked at the beginning, why did you decide to pursue your master's in medical education? And I mentioned before, I went into this career in academic medicine because I truly enjoy teaching. I love education. But then I came to realize that I wasn't an expert educator and I wanted to learn more. And so that drove me to look into this master's and now be enrolled in the master's at the University of Pennsylvania to become a better clinician educator and be able to impart knowledge and grow the field of academic anesthesiology in new ways. So follow your dream, follow your passion is what I want others to do.
Iona, what about you?
I just want to say that your energy will take you very far. And so just bring energy into whatever you want to excel in, and you will excel. Don't be shy. Don't feel like somehow you don't deserve to be at the table, or like maybe you are just not meant to, to be incredible. It will just take its own path. I mean, it's hard to know what is out there. It's hard to know what you can achieve. I mean, to me, even now, like me being a professor one day seems really far out of reach. And like, who am I to even imagine such a thing? But just bring your passions, and everything will just follow. And and life will work itself out for you.
I'm gonna take the I'm gonna take the prerogative to ask one last question before we close out. And that is because I think this is another complaint that I've heard sometimes. And that is, what do you do if you start with someone? And I love the fact that she's a mentor, it sounds like, who's been able to follow her throughout her career, but either through you move, they move, something changes within your career, your life, you either lose that mentor or for whatever reason that mentor's vision, I guess, doesn't, or your vision doesn't gel with the mentor. How do you find other mentors, or how do you break up a mentor mentee relationship if it's not working, and find someone from whom you can get the kind of support that you need? And we'll start with Iona, since I started with Titi last time.
Rita, whether it's good or bad, you learn from everyone. Everyone is my mentor, whether they realize it or not. You're my mentor as well. I don't know if you know that, Rita, but that's kind of why I try to find you at the ASA. So I go around trying to find people and connect with people and sort of, hanging out with people. I try to sit at the same table with Titi whenever I go to Penn. And so, yeah, like I'm taking all this advice from her and found a coach that she recommended. And so here she is, my mentor. So, people, they walk around and I just sort of like bring them into my stratosphere.
That is wonderful. What a wonderful attitude to have. Titi, how about you? This will be the last word. Well, before we close out.
It is so challenging to try to end a mentoring relationship, but there are times when both individuals realize that that relationship is not working, either for one or the other, be it time commitment, be it perceived competition, whatever it may be. Ideally, what should happen is a conversation between the two so that the relationship can come to a conclusion. Unfortunately, what often happens is silence from one and then distance created, and that ends the mentorship relationship. But the ideal would be that there is a formal discussion so that the time that the mentor is volunteering really and invested in the growth of the mentee is acknowledged and thanked, and then we can move on to another mentor. And where do you find these mentors? As Iona said, a mentor is everywhere. Peer mentors like we have for one another. We can look at senior colleagues at our national meetings who could be individuals who could mentor us. Historically, people would say, don't ask a mentor to mentor you, just let it be more fluid, let it be organic. But more recently, it's been said that you want to make that formal ask because you want them to be committed to potentially meeting with you quarterly, twice a year, monthly, whatever it may be. So you may need to make a formal ask. So if there's somebody who you're seeing their career trajectory and you hope to emulate, it's that individual that you may consider reaching out to.
Well, this was just fabulous. You guys are amazing. And I thought this was a wonderful talk. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you again for joining us for another episode of Vital Times, the CSA's podcast, and we will see you next time.